There's something unsettling about attics, isn't there? By day, they're dusty storage spaces full of forgotten boxes and broken furniture. But at night, when the house grows quiet and every creak echoes like a whisper, attics feel alive. They hold on to things too long. Memories, secrets, and sometimes objects that should never have been kept at all. Tonight's story is about one such object, a doll. Not the kind you see in toy stores or perched neatly on a child's bed, but a doll that doesn't belong anywhere. A doll that waits. It all began when I inherited my grandmother's house, a creaky old Victorian home that smelled faintly of cedar and mothballs, with long hallways and narrow staircases. Most of the rooms were familiar, filled with memories from childhood visits. But the attic was different. I had never been allowed up there as a child. Whenever I asked, my grandmother would shake her head firmly, her eyes shadowed in a way that silenced me. "The attic isn't for you," she'd say. I thought she was simply being protective, worried about the steep stairs, the dust, the possibility of splinters. But on the first night I spent in the house alone, curiosity got the better of me. The floorboards groaned as I climbed the narrow staircase, flashlight in hand, the air growing colder with each step. At the top was a wooden door, its paint chipped and flaking. The knob resisted when I turned it, as though it didn't want to open. But with a sharp push, it creaked inward. The attic smelled of dust and time. Boxes were stacked high, covered in yellowing sheets, cobwebs hanging in thick strands from the beams. My flashlight swept across trunks, broken chairs, stacks of old newspapers. Ordinary things, all things that made sense in an attic, until I saw her. She sat in the farthest corner, propped upright against a crate, a doll. At first glance, she was beautiful in a way. Porcelain skin, painted lips, glass eyes that reflected the flashlight's beam. But something was off. Her dress was tattered, yellowed with age, and one shoe was missing. Her hair, once neatly styled, hung in uneven clumps, and her eyes didn't look like painted glass. They looked wet, alive, watching. I froze, every instinct screaming to leave. But I forced a laugh to calm myself. It was just a doll, just an old, forgotten toy my grandmother had kept tucked away. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that she was waiting. I stepped closer, the beam of the flashlight trembling in my hand. The closer I got, the more detail I saw. A crack running from the corner of her mouth, down her chin, like a scar. Faded paint around her eyelids, giving the impression of shadows, as though she hadn't slept in years. Something about her presence unnerved me, more than the entire attic combined. I leaned closer, studying her face, when I heard it, a faint scuff of movement. Behind me, I spun around, flashlight beam darting across boxes and beams. Nothing, just dust swirling in the light. My heart pounded as I turned back toward the doll and froze. Her head was tilted. It hadn't been tilted before. I blinked hard, telling myself it was just my imagination, dust in my eyes, a trick of the flashlight beam. But deep down, I knew the doll's head had been straight when I found her. Now it leaned ever so slightly. Her chin dipped, her glassy eyes angled upward toward mine. A chill ran down my spine. I forced a shaky laugh, my voice sounding too loud in the quiet attic. Old dolls shift, I muttered. They settle, they move when the floor creaks. I tried to believe it, but the air was too still, too heavy. I crouched low, shining the flashlight across her porcelain face. Every detail sharpened in the harsh beam, the crack along her chin, the faint scratches near her temple, the odd dampness in her eyes. They gleamed as though reflecting light from a source that wasn't there. I stood quickly, brushing dust from my jeans. My grandmother must have kept her tucked away for decades, forgotten and ignored. That explained the state of her dress, the fading paint, the eerie aura. She was nothing more than a relic. And yet, I couldn't bring myself to leave her sitting there. Something about her demanded attention. I reached down, hesitating as my fingers hovered just above her tiny hand. It was porcelain, smooth and fragile, but the longer I stared, the more it seemed like she was waiting for me to hold it. My stomach turned, and I pulled back quickly, shaking my head. A sound broke the silence, a soft tap, 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 like fingernails against wood. My head whipped around, flashlight beam slicing through the attic. Nothing, just the skeletal outline of beams and boxes. The sound stopped as suddenly as it began. I swallowed hard, nerves prickling, and turned back toward the doll. My breath caught in my throat. Her head was straight again. I staggered backward, the flashlight jerking wildly in my hand. My chest rose and fell in quick, shallow breaths. It's in my head. I whispered to myself, I'm tired. That's all. But the attic felt different now. Heavier. The kind of heavy that comes before a storm, when the air hums with pressure. I forced myself to turn away, shining the light toward a stack of boxes in the corner. Distraction, I thought. Just distract yourself. The boxes were filled with the usual clutter. Old clothes, brittle books, cracked picture frames. But when I flipped open one box, I froze. Inside were more dolls, smaller, less lifelike, but all of them with the same painted eyes, the same delicate porcelain faces. Some were missing limbs, others had chipped features, but they were arranged neatly, carefully, as though someone had placed them there with intent. I backed away quickly, nearly tripping over a loose floorboard. My heart hammered in my chest. This wasn't just an attic full of junk. It was a collection, a shrine, and the doll in the corner, the one with the tilted head and watching eyes, was the centerpiece. The tapping returned, louder this time. Tap, tap, tap. It came from directly above me, from the roof beams. I swung the flashlight upward, but there was nothing, just dust and rafters. My skin prickled, every instinct screaming to get out. I turned back toward the door, ready to leave, but the beam of the flashlight passed over the doll again, and I froze. Her cracked porcelain mouth was open, not wide, not enough to scream, but just slightly parted, as though she had started to speak. I stood frozen, staring at that tiny porcelain mouth. It hadn't been opened before, I was sure of it. Now it was parted just enough to show the faint outline of painted teeth, darkened with age. My chest tightened. I whispered to myself, it's just broken, cracked over time. But the words rang hollow. I wanted to leave, to slam the attic door shut and never return. Yet something held me there, as if the air itself had weight, pinning me in place. My flashlight trembled in my hand as I forced myself to look away from her and toward the door. It was closed. Hadn't I left it cracked open? I was certain I had. Now it was firmly shut, the old knob glinting faintly in the weak light. My stomach dropped. I lunged toward it, reaching for the handle, but it refused to budge. It was stuck, as if something heavy pressed against it from the other side. Behind me, the tapping resumed. Louder, faster. Tap, 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 tap. My blood ran cold. I spun around, flashlight beams sweeping the room. Dust swirled in the air, and for a moment, I thought I saw movement between the boxes. Something small, darting out of sight. My breath came quick and shallow. "This isn't real," I whispered. "It's just my nerves, just my imagination." But the doll, she was no longer sitting against the crate. She was upright. I stumbled backward, slamming into a pile of boxes. My flashlight shook wildly, casting jagged shadows across the beams. The doll stood in the center of the attic floor now, cracked dress hanging loose, glass eyes reflecting the trembling beam. Her mouth was still open, slightly wider than before. I blinked, and she was back against the crate. My heart raced, sweat prickling the back of my neck. The air was stifling, thick with dust and something else. Something sour, like rotting fabric. I wiped my mouth with the back of my hand, trying not to gag. I forced myself to move toward the door again, my steps unsteady. But the moment I touched the knob, a new sound filled the attic. A giggle, high-pitched, soft, childlike. It came from everywhere and nowhere, bouncing off the rafters, curling through the shadows. My skin crawled. I turned slowly, my flashlight beam jittering across the room. The dolls in the box. Their glass eyes caught the light, glinting like dozens of tiny stars. For a moment, I could have sworn their heads had shifted too, all angled slightly upward, watching. The giggle came again, closer now. I stumbled back, the knob slipping from my hand. My foot caught on something, and I looked down. A porcelain arm, broken clean off from one of the dolls in the box. It lay across the floorboards like it had been placed there, waiting for me to trip over it. My chest tightened. I turned back toward the crate in the corner. The main doll hadn't moved this time. She still sat there, her cracked mouth slightly open, but her head was tilted farther now, an unnatural angle that made my stomach churn. The tapping began again, faster, harder, like fingernails drumming frantically on wood. My flashlight sputtered, threatening to die, and I smacked it with the heel of my hand. The beam steadied and landed directly on the doll's face. Her mouth was wide open, too wide. The porcelain stretched impossibly, jagged cracks spreading across her cheeks. Darkness pooled in the hollow of her throat, too deep for something so small. And from that yawning mouth came the sound again. Childlike giggles, layered with whispers, overlapping. Too many voices for one tiny figure. I stumbled backward, nearly dropping the flashlight. The attic felt smaller now, pressing inward, the ceiling lowering, the walls inching closer. The air vibrated with that chorus of sound, and the door behind me rattled, as if something on the other side was holding it shut. I knew then. The attic wasn't just storage, it was a prison, and the doll wasn't waiting to be found. She was waiting to be freed. The attic pressed in on me, every beam groaning as though the house itself were alive. My flashlight quivered in my sweaty grip, its weak beam locked on the doll's mouth, stretched unnaturally wide. Cracks spiderwebbed across her porcelain face. But she didn't crumble. She held herself upright, her hollow throat spilling laughter that wasn't hers. Laughter that didn't belong to any child alive. I staggered backward, colliding with a stack of boxes that toppled over, spilling their contents across the floor. Old photographs slid out, black and white faces staring up at me, families, children, and in every photo, somewhere in the corner, there she was, the same doll, unchanged, cradled in the arms of one child or another. The air froze in my lungs. Decades, generations, she had always been here. The giggling quieted, replaced by a single word whispered over and over. Play, play, play. It came from everywhere. Above, behind, inside my ears. My heart slammed against my ribs. I whipped the light toward the box of smaller dolls. My blood ran cold. Their heads had shifted again, all of them, turned toward me, glass eyes glowing faintly in the beam. Dozens of tiny mouths were open just a fraction, as if ready to join in the chorus. Stop, I screamed, my voice raw. Leave me alone. The attic answered with silence. For a moment, I thought it was over, that I had somehow broken the spell. But then came the sound of tiny porcelain feet. Click, click, click. Light, deliberate, crossing the floor toward me. I spun back. The doll had moved, no longer slumped against the crate. She stood in the middle of the attic floor, upright, balanced, waiting, her head tilted at that unnatural angle, mouth stretched into a silent scream. My hand shook as I raised the flashlight. What do you want? My voice cracked. Her glass eyes caught the beam, reflecting not light but something darker, endless, as if I was staring into two bottomless wells. And in the silence that followed, I realized the answer. She didn't want to hurt me. She wanted me to join her. The attic vibrated with the word again. Play. The door behind me rattled violently, the knob twisting. Something, or someone, was forcing it shut from the other side, keeping me trapped. My chest tightened as panic rose like a tide. I lunged for the door anyway, pounding against it with my fists. Let me out, I shouted, my voice breaking. The tapping returned, this time not above me, but beneath, from the floorboards. Tiny knocks, hundreds of them, echoing in rhythm with my heartbeat. I staggered back, my flashlight beam darting across the floor. I saw cracks forming between the boards, small slivers of light shining through as though something waited just below the surface. The giggles returned, louder, layered, spilling from the cracks in the floor, from the mouths of the dolls, from the yawning mouth of the one in the center. My head spun, my body trembling with the overwhelming sound. I dropped the flashlight. The beam rolled across the floor, landing on her feet. Tiny porcelain shoes, one cracked, one missing. They began to move, one step forward, then another. The giggles grew into shrieks of joy, deafening, inhuman. As she walked toward me, I scrambled backward, hands clawing against the doorframe. My fingers wrapped around the knob, pulling, twisting, begging for it to open. My breath came in short gasps, vision blurring with panic. And then, silence. I dared to look back. The doll stood inches from me now, her glassy eyes locked on mine, her cracked mouth frozen in an impossible grin. She whispered one last word, clear as glass breaking. Stay. The door burst open behind me. The door burst open with such force that I nearly fell backward down the stairs. Cold air rushed into the attic, cutting through the thick, suffocating atmosphere. Without thinking, I scrambled through the doorway, stumbling down the narrow steps two at a time. My shoulder slammed against the wall. But I didn't stop. I didn't dare. The laughter chased me, high-pitched and echoing, bouncing off the beams as though the whole house had learned how to laugh. My flashlight clattered down the steps behind me, the beams spinning wildly across the walls. I hit the bottom landing hard, gasping for breath, my hands shaking uncontrollably. Silence fell. I pressed myself against the wall, ears straining. The attic above was still again. The giggles, the tapping, the whispers, all gone. Only the creak of the old house remained. My chest heaved as I tried to convince myself it was over, that I had escaped. But then I looked down at my hands. They were covered in dust and splinters from the attic floor and clutched tightly in my fist. Though I didn't remember picking it up, was the broken porcelain arm of one of the smaller dolls. My stomach turned. I dropped it immediately, watching it shatter against the floorboards. The sound was sharp, final, but as the shards scattered, I noticed something horrifying. Faint scratches on the porcelain hand, letters almost too small to read. "Stay with us." I backed away quickly, tripping over myself as I stumbled into the hallway. My heart raced as I slammed the attic door shut, pressing my weight against it. For a long moment, I stood there, every muscle tense, waiting for the knob to twist, for the door to rattle, but nothing happened. The house fell still once more, as if it had returned to the silence of any ordinary home. I told myself it was done, that I would never set foot in that attic again. I locked the door, shoved an old dresser in front of it, and tried to sleep, but sleep never came. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her, the doll, her wide, cracked grin, her head tilted at that unnatural angle, the way her glass eyes followed me, unblinking, relentless, and underneath it all, that single word echoed through my mind, faint as a breath against my ear: stay. Days passed. I avoided the attic, avoided even glancing at the ceiling where the door was hidden above. But no matter how far I stayed away, I couldn't escape her. At night, I heard the soft tap-tap-tap of porcelain feet on the floorboards above my bedroom. Sometimes, the faint giggle would drift down the staircase, so quiet, I almost convinced myself it was my imagination. Almost. On the fourth night, I woke to find something sitting on my dresser. A shoe, tiny, porcelain, the missing shoe from the doll in the attic. I don't know how long I stared at it before shoving it into a drawer and slamming it shut. I wanted to run, to abandon the house, to never return. But where would I go? This house was mine now, and perhaps so was she. Some things aren't meant to be found. Some things aren't meant to be disturbed. My grandmother had known. That's why she'd kept the attic locked, why she'd warned me never to go up there. And now, it was too late, because once you've seen her, once you've looked into those glass eyes, she never really lets you go. And now, as you lie in bed, listening to this story, take a moment to think about your own attic, or your basement, or the forgotten corners of your home, the places you avoid, the boxes you never open. What waits there, hidden in the dark, patient and silent? Maybe it's just dust and cobwebs, or maybe it's something else, something that remembers being disturbed, something that wants you to stay. So tonight, when you close your eyes, if you hear the faint sound of porcelain tapping across the floor, don't look, don't search, and whatever you do, don't answer when the laughter comes. If this story kept you awake just a little longer or gave you chills before you drift into sleep, make sure you subscribe to this channel right now. Hit the notification bell so you'll never miss another tale. Every week, we explore a new haunted place, a new midnight story, a new whisper in the dark. And don't stop here. The next video in this series is waiting for you. Click it and you'll find yourself in another story, another haunting, another journey into the unknown. Thank you for watching. Sleep well if you can. And remember, some toys are never meant to be played with.